Pardonnez-nous le retard, mais ça décale toujours contre notre volonté. Aujourd'hui, maintenant, on va passer aux neurosciences. J'ai beaucoup entendu parler d'émotions tout à l'heure à travers les témoignages de Jacques Binger et Michel Gutten. Et j'aimerais bien qu'on s'y concentre maintenant, étant entendu que les sciences ont démontré, et les analyses ont quand même démontré que tous nos actes quotidiens, que ce soit à travers notre vie professionnelle ou personnelle, sont guidés par l'émotion. Et on est au démarrage des neurosciences. Il me paraît vraiment important de savoir ce qui se passe dans notre cerveau. Pardonnez-moi, j'ai couru. J'aurais dû faire du yoga plutôt. De savoir ce qui se passe dans notre cerveau lorsqu'on prend la décision de faire quelque chose, ou la décision d'acheter, la décision de naviguer sur Internet. Et je trouve que l'écran digital offre une magnifique terre d'émotion, offre un univers féerique qu'on va essayer d'explorer aujourd'hui avec 3 experts. Donc, Leighton, qui n'est pas là.
Si, elle est là.
C'est Docteur Leighton du Nielsen Group. Je remercie particulièrement le Nielsen Group parce qu'elle vient à 2 représentants éminents aujourd'hui. Et Leighton est docteur en neurosciences et responsable du département de neurosciences du Nielsen Group. Je fais monter également Marina Wallace du St. Martin's College, qui est venu également à 2 représentants éminents aujourd'hui. Et puis Jean-Louis Prata, qui vient pour IME. Donc, on va les laisser explorer. Alors, cette keynote est principalement en anglais, mais je pense que le cerveau parle à chacun d'entre vous. Donc, je transmets la parole aux experts.
Ok, donc sinon on pratiquera la langue des signes pour ceux qui seraient mal à l'aise. Donc, thank you, Jane and Marina. So you are the English-speaking block, and there's the French-speaking block here. So, okay. Donc, ce qu'on va faire pour cette table ronde, Marina et Jane ont toutes les deux une petite vidéo d'introduction, et puis je vous présenterai tout le monde après ça. Maybe Jane, in a few words, just introduce yourself, what you're doing and what you're doing with our brains, and what do you want to do with my brains, with their brains, with customers' brains. And then I think you've got a video. Yeah. Do you want just to introduce yourself and then we switch to the video? If you,
yeah? I have a presentation as well. So
okay, no problem. So, would you like to start with the presentation or the video? What is the best for you?
I'll start with the presentation. The video comes at the end.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
You're the boss.
So, glad to hear it. So, I am Jane Leighton. Bonjour. I will have to speak in English, I'm afraid, because I am English. So
it's quite a good reason.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my French is really not up to doing this presentation in French. But if you have any questions or if I go too fast, please do let me know. So what we're going to start with today is a little game. So I'll need everybody to participate really loudly. It's really, really simple, but hopefully it'll wake you up after your break and before lunch. All I need you to do is just shout out the colour of whatever you see. And you can do it in French. So shout out the colour in French, nice and quickly. Everyone got it?
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. In French.
Bleu, orange, violet, vert, table. Bleu, orange, vert, rouge, bleu, violet, orange, rouge, vert, orange, bleu.
Okay, so some people did quite well, some people not so much. So it was a very simple task, shouting out the colour. We can all do that very easily, but something interfered with our ability to do that. Something we were not aware of, something we were not conscious of, something we couldn't control. So something going on in our subconscious was making us want to read those words when all we were told to do was shout out the colour. So that subconscious part of the brain is really important. It's really important in our decision-making for every decision we make throughout life. So the games and the tests are not over. There's one more to go. These 2 squares here, do you think they're the same colour or different colours? So who thinks they are the same? A few people. Is it because you know I'm tricking you? So who thinks they're different colours? So definitely a majority of people. So to most of us, these do look like they're different colours. But actually, you probably guessed by now, I am tricking you. So when I cover up everything around, you can see that they are actually the same. So our brains, they make shortcuts, they make assumptions, and we're not aware of them, we can't control them, and sometimes they change the way we see things, and sometimes they change the way we make decisions. But this subconscious part of the brain is not something we can control. So even when we go back to the original shape, we cannot help but see them as different. Even though we know that they're the same, we cannot help but see them as different. So this subconscious part of the brain is really important for our decision making. And that's really why we have a consumer neuroscience practice at Nielsen, in order to try and delve into people's subconscious and understand how they are responding to any kind of stimuli or communications. So some of you have probably already heard in the past of these two systems in the brain. So System 1 and System 2. There's a book by Daniel Kahneman that I really recommend that deals with these two systems and gives lots of examples of how we use different systems and different times. So System 1 is very quick, it's very fast, it's automatic, it's emotional, and actually it's nice and easy for the brain to use System 1. And the brain is lazy, so it uses System 1 whenever it can. System 2, on the other hand, is much slower, it's much more effortful, and it's more rational. And if possible, we will avoid using System 2 because it takes lots and lots of effort. So an example of these two systems, if you look at the image on the left, all of us can immediately tell what this person is thinking. We can tell that she's not happy, she's pretty angry, and she's probably going to start shouting at us. And we can tell that without any effort. So System 1, at work. On the right-hand side, if we were asked to do this mathematical sum, chances are we wouldn't like it. Chances are we'd start to sweat, our pupils would start to dilate, we'd feel quite stressed. And I won't ask any of you to do it, but that would be System 2 that we would need to do that. So if possible, we'll stay in System 1. Here's another question for you. How many animals did Moses take on the ark? Anybody got an idea? Lots? Actually, he didn't take any. You're thinking of Noah. Actually, Moses didn't take any at all. So once again, System 1 just made a shortcut. You think, okay, it's something biblical. Moses fits. Actually, it's not Moses, it's Noah. But you wouldn't have noticed because, if possible, we're not using System 2. So both of these systems are really important, and they're both used for all of our decision making, and they're both used in all of our day-to-day lives. Predominantly, we would use System 1 if we're watching TV, when we're online, most of our day-to-day purchases, and we'd use System 2 when we're doing mathematical sums or filling in questionnaires because it's a little bit more effort for us. But both are important when it comes to making decisions. So we can make decisions in a couple of different ways. We can make them just based on conscious, rational facts. And this is quite a classic path to purchase, one that most people have seen in lots of textbooks. But it's becoming more and more clear that there are other influences on our decision making. So those non-conscious or emotional values can be really, really important for decision making in a couple of ways. So they can influence what we think, they can influence what we believe, or they can just directly influence our choices. And this is quite well known within the science community, that both conscious and non-conscious values influence our decisions. And it's like this for all brands. It's like this for fast-moving consumer goods, for big purchases like houses, cars. But what does it mean for luxury brands? Well, for luxury, I think we all probably feel that they're quite emotional brands, that we make those decisions really with our heart more than our head, and they're less about what we think rationally. And that's probably what most of us feel about luxury, about exclusive, about those brands that are special to us. And actually that's backed up by the science. So some experiments have shown that whenever we look at luxury brands, those parts of the brain that are reward parts of the brain, they become active. And that's different to value brands, where the more rational bits of our brain that are doing the evaluation, those are more active for your value brands. So it looks like luxury brands are more involved with reward. They make us feel like we're getting some kind of reward. And these reward areas of the brain are also active in response to a few other things: delicious food, addictive drugs, sexual contact, but then also our favorite brands and luxury brands. So we know from this that when we're talking about luxury, Emotions are really, really important, and they are what are going to drive behavior change. They are what are going to drive purchasing. But is that all? Is it all just about an emotional connection? Well, I don't think so, because all of these reactions in the reward center, like food, drugs, sex, they're all there from an innate response. So we don't have to learn that. That just comes naturally. Delicious food will just automatically activate those bits of the brain. But when we come to brands, that's not an innate response. We're not born loving luxury brands. We're not born with favorite brands. That has to be learned, and that has to be learned over time. And to do that, we need memory. So it's not just enough to have an emotional connection. We also need to have memory activation. So we have shown with lots of validation work that you need both of these to get behavior change, and more so possibly with luxury brands. So you need to have memory and emotion working together as part of a neural network to drive behavior. Emotion is not enough, and we see time and time again adverts or communication that are very, very emotional, but they fail to communicate any key messages or any brand. And so they're entertaining people, but they're not going to necessarily do anything in the long term. So if we know now that we need emotions and we need memory in order to drive behavior change, how are we going to measure that? How are we going to make sure that we are actually driving emotions and driving memory activation? Especially because now we know that we have fast thinking and we have slow thinking. We have non-conscious and we have conscious responses. So the traditional techniques that we typically use to measure consumers, they're not going to work. They're not going to get at these deep emotional feelings. They're not going to get at our memory networks in the brain. They'll be quite good at getting at slow thinking, so that conscious bit of the brain. Traditional asking techniques will be great at getting at those, but they won't be so good at accessing our subconscious or our fast thinking. And in order to do that, that's when we need to turn to neuroscience. So that's what we do at Nielsen Neuro. We use EEG and eye tracking. We basically pop these lovely caps on people's heads. They're like a swimming cap with holes in it, and some sensors that get stuck on, and they very cleverly act as a microphone, which allow us to measure people's brain's response. And by doing this, we can get really, really accurate and detailed information on how people respond second by second to any communication, any design, any in-store material, pretty much anything that you can show a consumer in a lab. Just to give you a brief summary of what we do, I have a video which is helpfully in French, so should be a little bit more easy for you to understand. Okay?
Thank you.
Depuis près d'un siècle, les experts en marketing cherchent à comprendre les consommateurs, en leur demandant ce qu'ils pensent, pourquoi ils le pensent et en quoi cela influence leur comportement. Mais les avancées des neurosciences ont révélé qu'avant de penser, nous ressentons. Cela signifie qu'avant même de pouvoir articuler nos propres pensées, le processus de prise de décision est déjà bien avancé. Chez Nielsen, notre mission est de comprendre le consommateur dans son ensemble. Grâce à Nielsen Neuro, nous pouvons le faire comme jamais auparavant. L'essentiel de l'analyse marketing repose sur la réponse articulée. En procédant ainsi, on passe probablement à côté de 50% de ce qu'il se passe réellement. Il y a un délai de 300 millisecondes entre le moment où l'on voit quelque chose et le moment où on en prend conscience. C'est pendant ce délai qu'a lieu la prise de décision. Pour les spécialistes du marketing, il est décisif de capturer ces moments. C'est pourquoi nos neuroscientifiques mesurent ce qu'il y a de plus fondamental chez les consommateurs, leurs ondes cérébrales. En combinant électroencéphalogramme et eye tracking, nous mesurons la réponse des consommateurs à vos contenus marketing à un niveau très fin, ce qui permet d'identifier ce qui fonctionne et ce qui ne fonctionne pas. Parce que le cerveau humain est globalement le même, quelle que soit votre origine, la neuroscience du consommateur se révèle importante sur tous les stimuli marketing et dans le monde entier. Que nous testions des publicités, des emballages, des affichages en magasin ou une image de marque, nos résultats ont un impact international. L'une des grandes forces de l'approche de Nielsen est son enracinement profond dans la science. La science est au cœur de notre identité. Elle fait partie de notre ADN. Notre conseil de surveillance scientifique provient des plus grandes universités au monde. Ensemble, nous avons développé le tout premier casque électroencéphalogramme à usage médical et sans fil au monde. Son faible encombrement permet une utilisation qui va au-delà des laboratoires pour avoir un impact sur les vies des patients à travers le globe. Que ce soit pour la médecine ou pour le marketing, nous nous mobilisons pour apporter des changements positifs. Les dépenses marketing sont considérables. Cette démarche permet d'optimiser les investissements marketing comme jamais auparavant. Avec Nielsen Neuro, nous avons le pouvoir de transformer la neuroscience en données et insights exploitables. Et nous mettons tout en œuvre pour utiliser ce pouvoir au profit, à la fois de votre entreprise et des communautés qui nous entourent.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, that's it from me.
Okay.
Any questions, please
I
let
have
me
a
know.
very quick and I hope funny question for you. So when I saw you a few minutes ago, you looked to me like having dark hairs and blue eyes. Are you tricking me? Or?
Yeah, I'm really a blonde.
Oh, okay. I knew that. Okay.
Depends on where I stand.
Okay, so I'll come back to you. So Marina, do you have something to, but you want?
I have
Okay.
a presentation as well.
Wonderful.
And I just discovered that this thing, so I'm going to use it as well. Okay, thanks. Right, so can I communicate first of all with the box there? So you have slides for me, presentation, and let's see if I can work it. Perfect. So I can do it on my own, thank you. And then I'll tell you about the film. So I'll go. Whilst you were having a break, we had a mini conference here, which was very interesting. But that you'll see the results of that later on. So I made some notes, and I had written quite a lot, but I think I've scrapped now almost everything, and I'm going to, this is my talk now, so it's a different kind of thing. I'm working with the first brain, with the fast one, rather than with the slow one. And that is because something has been said about emotions and Christina, so I think repeating things doesn't necessarily help, but I'm going to say, first of all, differently from probably quite a lot of people here, I'm an academic. And I've been an academic for a very, very long time, for 25 years, and in the same place at Central St. Martin's at the University of the Arts in London. I also don't speak French. I come from Italy originally, so I understand you, but I can't communicate directly. The other thing is that I want to tell you what I have done a little bit in the past and how we connect, why I think I'm here, because it's always incredibly interesting to be in completely different kind of environments and be tested, because that's how the innovation, you know, when you do something that is unusual and outside your field. So first of all, it's Artakt, and it's curating in action. And just a very short mention to the projects that I've done. So I'm a curator, professor of curation, and I curate exhibitions. Exhibitions are big projects. They take, my exhibitions take between 5 and 6 years to make. They take a very long time. So they begin with an idea, and then the idea has to be approved by the board of the museum, and the board of the museum has to approve a budget, and the marketing and sponsorship people have to find loads of money, and when the money is being looked for, at the same time we do a lot of research for a very long time. For about 4 or 5 years the research carries on, and we keep all the information on the research. So just going through very few of the projects, maybe the major ones. Spectacular Bodies was an exhibition that I curated in 2000 at the Hayward Gallery. So it started, the preparation started in 1995. And it took 5 years. And it occupied both floors of the Hayward Gallery. It was about the human body, and it was about anatomy before the body could be seen through non-invasive techniques. So before X-rays, anything before X-rays where you had to open up the body, or the body had to be dead in order to be looking inside it. That is a subversive subject. It's a critical subject, and it's normally something that people didn't want to talk about. And our bodies are secret, and we still find it a little bit difficult. So the projects I do are quite subversive in spirit. So this was Spectacular Bodies, for which we actually employed an advertising company to do the publicity, which is unusual. This is a shot, 2 shots, one after the other. I don't know why this is going so fast now. Shot of the inside of the exhibition, which mixed historical objects and contemporary objects. Very large installation. Another major project, which lasted 7 years, was the exhibition on Leonardo da Vinci's drawings, and that was mostly on his thoughts and thought processes and drawings. And this is what the exhibition looked like in the making at the Victoria and Albert Museum. The exhibition that followed this, sorry, but this PowerPoint presentation seems to be running a bit faster than my brain. And this is the exhibition in 2007, which also took 6 years to make, called Seduced, the art and sex from antiquity to now. So this was another difficult subject. It was now sex, and it was the visual representation of sex throughout the centuries and throughout cultures. This is the symbol of the exhibition, and it was a symbol of censorship, and how censorship is a fluid concept that changes across the times and across cultures. So what is censored now may not have been censored 100 years ago, and so on. So the fluidity of censorship and the fluidity of acceptability. And this was the panel, the initial panel of the exhibition, and this was the team. So my point about the projects is that they are big, collaborative projects. This is just a small group of people collaborating to make this exhibition. There were many more in the gallery that we worked with in order to create such a huge exhibition with 365 objects in the gallery, and a lot of diplomacy to be able to borrow the objects. Now, both exhibitions had the side of them that they had to be accepted by the public. So there was a big campaign. We have to be trained in how to speak to the media and how to put across the ideas so as not to shake things up too much, to get the exhibition accepted and to get the public to pay for the ticket and the galleries to make money out of the 900,000 euros that they spent on the exhibition only to set it up, to put it up, not to say about all the other expenses of the personnel that they normally have and that they put forward. So they're big, expensive projects, and it's very important that they do have recognition and also that they are accepted and that they are appreciated. So there is a strong marketing element in this as well, even though I don't think about that because my job is that of researching the exhibition. But having said that, great coups. We were able to borrow this hermaphrodite sculpture from the Borghese Gallery in Rome, which had never traveled abroad and had been shown in Rome, in a Catholic country, with the penis showing against the wall, or rather not showing, so that you wouldn't see that it was a hermaphrodite. You wouldn't guess that it was a woman and a man that had both sexes. And for the first time it was shown in the tutto tondo, so you could see it from all sides, and this was quite a coup. The other coup is when the objects are put together. So they're quite extraordinary things that happen during exhibitions. So these are very courageous and very interesting curatorial aspects. So we have to justify what we do. Now, I had various things that are to do with the things that you discussed about, but today, and I've put them up. The lock-in principle, Jane and I just referred that to Jane. I was saying, if we get used to something, we don't want to change our habits, even if we're presented something different or new that could be better for us. And I think, there are lots of things that could be said about that, but we are hugely over time. And I'm showing you 15 minutes of a film, so I really want to cut this presentation short, and I'm sure we'll be able to network and discuss things differently. There was something said about personalized experience versus mass experience. And there were lots of things that were said this morning which resonated, including Jonathan talking about China, and my initial research was in the relationship between Venice and the Ottoman Empire in the 15th and 16th century, both artistic and commercial relations. So there are lots of things as an academic that I can read in what you've discussed. But I will go ahead quickly, and this is the my definition, and this is the definition that, if you like, we work with, exhibitions are experiences. Exhibitions are physical experiences and immersive environments. You go to an exhibition and you feel the exhibition around you, you look at it, you read and you see it, but also you experience it by walking around. So the installation of an exhibition is very, very important. We place a lot of importance in that, and how you come out of the exhibition is what you maintain in your memory. Now, there are catalogs that you can keep, but the exhibition itself is the wonderful experience. It's not digital, it's physical. So the ultimate of being successful is the luxury of giving yourself the time to do what you want to do with the people you like. And I'm linking here the concept of success with the concept of luxury. And time is money, you remember, and time is, you need time, and we need time, and I think time is a luxury. So this is very, very important. So it's reading this sort of time and money in a different way from Scrooge. The film that I'm going to show you is just a 15-minute extract from a 1-hour-long film, a project that took me 5 years, of a collaboration between molecular biologists and artists. The task, I'll give it to you, think about what you would do. I was given in a project of 10 million euros, so it's an expensive project, funded by the European Community, the task of explaining to the general public, who were not scientists, what the scientists who've been given 10 million euros are doing in their labs in 12 scientific institutions across Europe, in Paris as well, the Marie Curie Institute here, in order to experiment on cell division, on human cell division. Please, Marina, explain that to the public, because we're getting 10 million of public money and we need to give back to the public. Now, it's an impossible task. How do you explain and entertain the public about the concept of human cell division? It's a really difficult task. So you can imagine that this project went through a lot of collaboration, a lot of talks, a lot of dialogues, and there are two different definitions here. One is communication, the other one is dialogue, and the dialogue must take into account listening, not just talking. So Lens on Life is the exhibition that came from this, and the meetings, and this is the exhibition, some shots of the exhibition. One exhibition is still on at the moment in Germany, so 3 exhibitions in 3 European countries. It started in Italy, in Rome, it went to London last month, and it's now in Heidelberg in Germany. And just some shots just to show you the artist's work. The concept was to put in contact one scientist and one artist, and to get the artist to be the mediator between the scientist and the public. So that rather than me, the curator, asking the scientist, what do you do in your labs, and then coming out of the lab and saying to you, this is what they've been doing in the labs, I actually got, after a long process of finding the right scientist and the right artists, the artist and the scientist to talk about what goes on in their brains, in their minds, in the processes of their research, in their lives, in the labs and in the studios, because lives are very important. It's not just what goes on in our brain, but what we construct in our lives with our brains and with what we do. And the great coup from my point of view was to get another 150,000 euros to pay for a documentary, which is, if you like, the digital side of my project. So this is the exhibition in Rome, and this is a timeline, and I'm just going through quickly. I chose to have some scientific objects to show that the molecular laboratory is actually like a jewelry laboratory. They work with very small, very tiny particles, and they have to be very precise, and there are lots of tools. They look like kitchen tools, they look like jewelry tools, and it's a very hands-on activity. I thought it was, the sort of white coated scientist who was doing incomprehensible things, but actually things are quite comprehensible if you spend time looking at them carefully. And these are the objects that one of the artists produced. These are cells, cancerous cells and non-cancerous cells next to each other, made in Venice. This is by another artist, Rob Kessler. So you have Lucy Orta, Rob Kessler, and this is Lucy's piece. Well, this is one cancerous cell and a normal cell on the right. and they were made in Murano, and this is by Ackroyd and Harvey. So this is just to give you a sense of the look of the exhibition in London and the look of the exhibition in Rome. Very minimalist pieces, very minimalist exhibition, but really what talked about the collaboration between the art and the science, the artist and the scientist, and the way they speak, is the film, of which I will show you 15 minutes. And what I would like you to focus on is the task, the fact that these two people came from completely different environments, different way of thinking, different way of making, geographically different, had never entered each other's spaces, physical spaces and mental spaces. So the process of putting them in contact with each other and creating a viable dialogue, creating a communication between them, think about that when you look at this. I think this was successful, but really, I'd be really interested to hear from you what you think after this. But think this was a long research process. So enjoy the 15 minutes. Thank you.
Cell division is the basis of all life. Cell division is absolutely fundamental to bacteria, it's fundamental in an elephant, and it's fundamental in you and me, and it's fundamental in a yeast cell. It's what distinguishes living things from non-living things. Non-living things can't procreate, whereas living things have this ability to procreate. It's fundamental to life, and we still don't understand the mechanics of it, and I want to understand the mechanics of it. I want to explain it in simple terms. Understanding the process of mitosis is one of the most fascinating things you can study. I think all of us in this world want to make a difference. I would like to bring something to understanding this that no other human being can. This is my lab, and this is where the experiments get done. And most of our experiments are done with yeast. The remarkable thing about yeast is it's actually very similar to you and me. We're first cousins genealogically, and we discover things about yeast, and they tell us about ourselves. But we're all essentially studying the cohesin complex. Cohesin is fundamental for mitosis because after the DNAs are replicated, it holds them together, and then the cell can pull them in opposite directions. Without cohesin, no mitosis, full stop.
I was just wondering how you would explain mitosis to a young child. I mean, how would you? So if I was 6.
Yes, well, I'll give it a try. I don't do that very often.
Yeah.
But
can you? I mean, is it possible?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Here's the cell. It's got a DNA molecule. The DNA molecule replicates. You've got 2 DNA molecules. And now you're going to make 2 cells where you want those 2 identical molecules to be in the 2 daughter cells. Every time you want the DNA to be copied perfectly and segregated perfectly. And that is what mitosis is about.
Do you think the dance metaphor is is that something that you think is like appropriate, or do you think that's just very pedestrian?
Okay, well now we're getting to the heart of the nub of the matter. Yeah. I think it's rather a good metaphor, this process of the chromosomes moving around and splitting, which is intrinsically beautiful. I think it's a nice analogy, but there's a much deeper analogy between mitosis and a dance. The problem the cell faces, you've got these 2 DNA molecules. Yeah. Now let's say they were you make them and then they're just sort of floating around in the cell. So how do you know which DNA molecules to move in opposite directions? If you just did it at random, you'd end up with some here and some there. Yeah. But what you actually want is the product, the 2 products of a single replication event, always to go like that, in all 46 cases.
Sounds like a folk dance to me, because there's a kind of a inevitability and an order which has already been decided beforehand. Whereas in the dance making that I practice, it's the opposite, because actually it's the inevitability of things that one is looking for. You know, it's the surprise thing.
Yes.
So it doesn't seem to be, in the end, it doesn't seem to be a perfect analogy with dance.
Absolutely.
You know?
It's not folk dance because the players are not sentient, and it's not contemporary dance because you don't want any surprises.
Yes.
As it were, it's a social dance. You've got two molecules, you can either pull them in the same direction or you pull them in opposite directions. It's a sort of 50-50.
Yeah.
It turns out that the connections between these microtubules and the chromosome, it's like a sort of claw, so that if you actually, if there's no tension, it'll fall off, but if there's tension, it sort of catches.
Yeah.
So that means that if you pull them in opposite directions, then the connections will be stable and you create tension.
Yeah.
That is like the rock and roll where you're pulling but you're still holding on.
Yeah.
And that's good. But if you get it wrong and you pull in the same direction, you don't generate tension. The connections aren't stable, they drop off and they try again. It's 50-50.
They have to learn to dance, basically.
They have to learn
to rock and roll.
So randomness is an intrinsic part of the whole process. But by selectively stabilizing the right ones, you end up with the right solution.
Is there a moment where you say, gosh, that's really beautiful, a beautiful concept, a beautiful... I mean, do you ever have those moments?
Yes, and I think what we discovered is very beautiful. But somebody else might just say, well, it's very simple. It's so simple, it has an elegance, it has a beauty. It has a form. If the story emerges from the form, I think that is one of the ways that beauty is...
I can totally agree with you on that, because I think that's really, for me, as a choreographer, that's really what I'm always struggling to get.
Great to see you. So am I going to understand this?
That's up to you, I guess.
That's the challenge, isn't it?
Well, I kind of decided, I suppose, I wouldn't be able to illustrate mitosis because I don't feel that's really what I'm going to be doing best. We spoke about perfect function and perfect structure, you know, something very simple and elegant.
Right.
But then I also understood that there are lots of unknowns and lots of monitoring, lots of testing.
And the symmetry and perfection emerges from
that mistake.
and
so
randomness.
I was interested in that movement of to and fro, because that's what it suggested to me.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I found inspiring. Just that moment, for me, it seemed to be a bit like when a dancer's in the wings of a theatre. You know, there's this kind of feeling of going, but not quite there. And then, of course, when you're on stage, that's it. That's where you've arrived. But there's always a stage of not quite arriving.
I'm going to be very curious, maybe if I get some of it. Ultimately, one might just say, well, wait a moment. I know that's just a metaphor, but if there is some real correspondence, then it might give me an idea.
Yes.
You know, ideas come from very strange places. It's the law of unintended consequences.
You know, try going from there to here, slowly. So
Everything was coming from the dancer, who was being nudged left and right by Shobana, but she was creating everything. And that's, I think, a relationship that if you're working in a lab and you're working with somebody who is a very good experimentalist and you're a more senior colleague and maybe you're setting the goals and maybe you're asking the questions, but they go off and have the good ideas. They go off and do the experiments that actually are revealing, and the less you instruct, the better. It was wonderful to see that process going on in a completely different medium, but it seemed to me very, exactly the same process. It revealed to me the professionalism and virtuosity of the dancer. I think the fundamental principle that Shobana wanted to get across was probably twofold. One was the dynamic nature of what's going on, the instability out of which this very stable outcome emerges. And the other principle was the tremendous importance of the duality of force and counterforce, i.e. the tension that's generated by two things pulling on each other. That is a real challenge to simplify, and very few people can do it, and she clearly has this knack and has this ability to translate it into the language of dance. And it doesn't matter what language you translate it in, if it's simple enough, you can translate it back again.
As you know, I've been working on this film for quite a long time now. So basically, of all the things that I read about mitosis, what I found most interesting was the microtubules. I'm always someone who's interested in margins coming to the center, and it seemed to me a story that I recognized myself. Right. Things from the outer edges coming into the center. And then what I found interesting from what I read, their total instability, their lengthening and shortening. And I think you also gave me an image of something being looked for and then final capture.
Yeah.
So in the film, I knew that the dancer's image couldn't be literal. So we spent a lot of time with an animator.
It couldn't be in the flesh, as it were.
No, so we had to kind of try and tell the story where this figure is trying to reach somewhere, and where they want to reach is the center. And the way they want to reach it is in a very symmetrical form. But anyway, I'll play the whole thing, okay. And then you could tell me how it speaks.
Because I only just saw glimpses of it when we were at St. Martin's, yes.
I hope you noticed she split into two.
I did. That's amazing. Quite extraordinary.
The biggest idea is instability. The minute she goes on one foot, the human body is unstable.
And asymmetric.
Asymmetric,
yeah.
Just only using different parts of the foot.
I think that's what's genius about it, actually. One takes for granted the symmetry, and one takes for granted what mitosis is all about, and that's what you see in the textbooks. But in fact, it doesn't come naturally at all. No. The natural state would be, you know, for it to be all completely asymmetric. Yeah. And I think, therefore, conveying it is something that's always reverting back to asymmetry, and then trying to exert symmetry as a sort of active, difficult process is, I think, is conveyed incredibly clearly.
Everything about the figure, the movement plus the medium, plus the animation, they're all together going for a very unstable scenario.
It seems to me that one of the things this also conveys is how the whole process could potentially go terribly badly wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
And you know, that's one thing that we know happens in cancer cells, is that it does go terribly badly wrong in ways that actually her movements, they represent that in a way.
So as much as possible, dance, obviously, you know, it's always got to be a metaphor. It can't be.
I think it's going to be a classic. I think it's going to be, you know, there are textbooks. There won't be textbooks in the future. There's, you know, there'll be biology on YouTube, and this will be up there in chapter 1.
For any artist, it's always interesting to be given a challenge. And so I think to be asked to make a film inspired by mitosis was a challenge as an artist, because it's something so specific. And, you know, I had to work very hard to find the metaphor that actually works as a piece of art, as well as something that was true to the facts of mitosis.
Shobna immediately could understand almost everything I was saying, and then took that and transformed it into a completely different medium and completely different language, a language of her world of dance, in a way that will spark the imagination of people who've never looked at mitosis in that light before.
On va remettre la lumière. Je vais voir si vous êtes divisé en cellules et que vous avez doublé de taille. Thank you. It was really amazing. So we'll come back to you in a few seconds, but go to the French boy. Frenchman,
donc,
sorry. Oui.
Moi, je vais vous parler en français. Donc, je m'appelle Jean-Louis Prata, je dirige le pôle innovation de l'Institut de médecine environnementale. Alors, l'Institut de médecine environnementale est un institut qui a été créé en 1987, donc bien avant que les neurosciences soient à la mode, avec l'ambition, l'énorme ambition de se dire, finalement, on doit pouvoir mieux comprendre le fonctionnement de l'humain avec une approche interdisciplinaire, c'est-à-dire plutôt que se limiter à des disciplines, la psychologie, sociale, cognitive, etc. Si on essaye d'intégrer toutes ces disciplines, on doit pouvoir mieux comprendre le comportement humain et donc aider les gens à mieux se connaître, mieux se développer, etc. Et donc c'est l'objet de l'IME finalement, et qui en plus a la particularité de faire de la recherche fondamentale, mais également de développer des applications pour faire du transfert de compétences, et donc pour que ces connaissances fondamentales puissent être utilisées dans le quotidien des gens. Alors historiquement, l'IME a beaucoup travaillé sur le développement personnel, sur le développement des talents, et depuis quelques années, nous travaillons sur le comportement de consommation et donc la relation aux marques. Alors, comment ça se passe finalement pour un peu illustrer les choses, et je vais revenir sur le luxe parce qu'on s'en est un petit peu éloigné là. Finalement, nous-mêmes, notre cerveau, nous sommes l'objet de plusieurs gouvernances à l'intérieur de notre cerveau. C'est-à-dire que notre cerveau n'est pas un tout homogène où tout fonctionne bien de manière homogène, mais nous avons plusieurs gouvernances. Alors, il y en a deux en particulier dont je vais vous parler qui sont intéressants, notamment par rapport au luxe. La première, c'est une gouvernance, alors c'est très archaïque, je vais vous parler de notre dimension très animale et très grégaire, c'est-à-dire que nous partageons avec un certain nombre d'animaux qui vivent en troupeau des mécanismes qui sous-tendent des instincts grégaires. Et donc, dans un troupeau, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Il y a une hiérarchie qui s'établit avec des dominants, des soumis, finalement, des personnes dominantes, des personnes soumises. Et dans le troupeau, les individus dominants ont tous les droits et les individus soumis ont tous les devoirs, pour illustrer un peu les choses. Alors, chez l'être humain, ce mécanisme existe toujours. Alors, il est plus subtil. En particulier, il y a entre ces deux extrêmes, finalement, il y a plein de positionnements différents. C'est-à-dire qu'on peut être soit plutôt dominant, c'est-à-dire plutôt chef de meute, plutôt chercher à s'imposer, à manipuler les autres, à impressionner les autres. Et là, vous voyez le lien avec le luxe, peut-être, qui peut se faire. Heureusement, si je puis dire, également beaucoup de personnes assertives, c'est-à-dire des personnes qui ne sont pas dans cette problématique de rapport de force, et des personnes qui peuvent être plutôt en position de soumission. Alors, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire si on rapproche ça du luxe? On peut voir ici, dans notre fonctionnement d'humain, dans le fonctionnement psychocognitif de l'être humain, une résonance entre le luxe et cet instinct qui fait qu'à certains moments, on peut ressentir le besoin d'impressionner, le besoin d'intimider, finalement, et le fait de montrer la force, la puissance que représente le fait de pouvoir acquérir des objets de luxe, peut être une motivation chez certains, pas chez tout le monde, je vous rassure, mais chez certains, pour finalement s'intéresser au luxe et s'intéresser à des beaux objets. En fait, la vraie finalité instinctive est de impressionner, montrer sa force et sa puissance. D'ailleurs, si vous voyez dans la communication, toutes les communications qui sont basées sur sexe, pouvoir, argent, prenez un clip de rap par exemple, on est loin du luxe, mais prenez un clip de rap, ce type de communication va mobiliser, va chercher cet instinct chez nous, cet instinct grégaire, cet instinct de dominance. Okay ? Alors, on va quitter les bas-fonds du cerveau pour aller quand même dans des choses un peu plus évoluées, et en particulier la dimension émotionnelle. Effectivement, on s'est demandé, on s'est interrogé, mais d'où venait l'émotion? Qu'est-ce qui fait qu'on aime une forme, une couleur? Qu'est-ce qui fait qu'on aime une chose, qu'on la déteste? Alors, on a longtemps pensé que ça pouvait être la culture, l'éducation. Les études ont montré que c'était pas la culture et l'éducation, en particulier les études d'enfants et de jumeaux. On a longtemps pensé que ça pouvait être les gènes, pourquoi pas? Il pourrait y avoir un gène, le gène je sais pas, de l'amour des formes arrondies, enfin je caricature un peu. C'est pas ça non plus. Et donc, si c'est pas culturel, si c'est pas génétique, a priori, la réponse est à chercher dans ce qu'on appelle l'épigénèse, c'est-à-dire l'interaction entre l'être humain, son cerveau et l'environnement. Et en particulier, on travaille sur un mécanisme qui sous-tend en fait nos motivations profondes, les choses vraiment qu'on aime, les choses qui nous passionnent, les choses qui nous portent, les choses qui nous ressourcent, qui, selon nos hypothèses et nos théories, en fait, sont fondées sur un mécanisme d'empreinte très précoce, c'est-à-dire qui se passe dans les tout premiers mois de la vie, où, en fait, le nouveau-né que nous avons tous été est très démuni pour survivre dans l'environnement. Lorsqu'il a faim, par exemple, lorsqu'il a froid, lorsqu'il a un problème, il n'est pas en capacité de demander, de faire, et donc il y a des émotions, des états de stress qui vont se manifester. Okay ? Et donc, alors, ce que je vous explique est un peu schématique, c'est un tout petit peu plus compliqué que ça, mais bon, vu le temps, je suis obligé d'aller vite. Donc, ce qui se passe, c'est que finalement, la succession d'expériences chez le nouveau-né de situations désagréables, j'ai faim, j'ai soif, de réponse et donc d'apaisement du besoin, de l'attention, va entraîner un mécanisme d'empreinte et donc d'idéalisation de certaines attitudes et certains comportements. Okay ? Prenons un exemple concret. Imaginons, je ne sais pas, un nouveau-né qui aura idéalisé le comportement de calme. Finalement, ça va donner adulte un trait de personnalité d'une personne qui est spontanément positive, optimiste, qui aime la simplicité, qui aime les choses naturelles. Okay ? Si on prend un autre exemple d'une autre personnalité, un mécanisme d'idéalisation, par exemple, d'un état dit de lutte, donc de colère. Donc le bébé en colère qui crie, qui hurle. Eh bien, qu'est-ce que ça va donner? Ça va donner finalement un trait de personnalité profonde, durable, de plaisir du dépassement de soi, plaisir de la performance, de plaisir de l'originalité. Okay ? Donc, bon, j'ai pas le temps de vous décrire en détail le modèle, mais donc on aboutit à un modèle à 8 dynamiques comportementales spontanées, c'est-à-dire des attitudes que l'on prend spontanément et qui, bien évidemment, vont rentrer en jeu dans nos choix de vie, et c'est souhaitable, mais également dans nos choix tous les jours et dans nos choix de consommation. Et j'ai pris des notes tout à l'heure, je ne sais plus qui disait un produit qui rentre en résonance avec quelqu'un. Eh bien, je pense qu'un produit qui rentre en résonance avec quelqu'un, en fait, est un produit qui, de par ses caractéristiques à tous les niveaux, finalement, fait vraiment écho à un élément de la personnalité profonde, de la dynamique de personnalité profonde de l'individu. Et donc, l'individu, inconsciemment, et souvent de manière implicite, va vraiment se retrouver dans ce produit, finalement, dans un produit ou dans une marque, et donc va développer une affection particulière, finalement, pour cette marque et pour ses produits, parce qu'elle fait écho, finalement, à lui, à ce qu'il est, à ses valeurs, à sa dynamique personnelle. Donc,
très bien. Yeah, because time is running fast. So have a seat. Yeah. One quick question for each of you, and then I think lunchtime will be the time and place. Maybe if you stay to mingle and exchange. Yeah. So Jane, the one who tricked me, the blonde girl. What's the frontier between understand how the brain processed things and then adapt, I don't know, marketing materials, videos and everything to what the consumer's brain is able to process, and tricking the brain? Is there a frontier? How are you playing with it? What's the difference between understanding and manipulating?
Okay, yeah, so most of the examples I use are just tricking people, but that's just to demonstrate what's going on in the subconscious. We are not about tricking people. We're merely measuring responses to stimuli. And if we see a response that's quite negative, then we can give some guidance on how to improve that, along with working with creatives to improve that. But it's not about manipulating, it's about optimizing, making it so you're communicating in a way that the brain likes.
Okay.
But unfortunately, we're not able to make people do things they don't want to do yet.
Yeah. So there's not this buy button, but we are speaking about...
No, we're not that good.
Okay. Marina, one quick question as well. Because you're working, it's very fascinating, because going from two different worlds getting together around heart and building something together, try to make people understand each other is quite amazing and something very difficult in this internet world, because people are going mitosis, so separating and living their own life. What kind of business application do you see in what you do?
Yeah. Well, the obvious thing is that if you can put two completely separate worlds together, and if you can get them to understand each other, ask questions, like each other, and appreciate deeply what the other does without the knowledge, you are on a winning scale.
Yeah.
You really are going to get so much out of people. And again, we don't do it to manipulate people, but maybe, it can be used.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible that most of our resistance comes from not knowing, not wanting, being afraid, which is another very old reaction, ancient reaction, afraid of something new that could hurt us, that could be poisonous, food, that could be leading to our death, professionally, physically, mentally. So the most important thing is to get to know the other and to get to know yourself in the process.
Yeah.
And that's the most difficult one. But it takes a lot of time, and it's not an instant cure. You can't really apply it quickly.
Could I translate it into saying that, let's say I'm a consumer, I'm quite not open to a specific brand because I think that in his world, his codes, ways, it's not my world, so I don't want to buy it. And suddenly, because you try to create this communication between these two worlds, I become open, and suddenly I can be a new customer for this brand?
Absolutely, but you really have to do it both ways, and you have to do it for real.
Yeah.
Digitally, it doesn't work. I tell you that what is really innovative about this film is that we took the scientist to the artist's space. As you saw, the scientist was there saying, I don't know, am I going to understand? And there was much more footage, but we cut some important footage. And the choreographer was saying, it's up to you if you understand or not. The scientist wanted to leave. He said to me in the morning, I've got to catch a plane and leave. I said, no, you're not catching a plane. You're staying here, change your flight arrangements. You're staying all day. He thought he could just be there for an hour. When you saw the dancer pull the rope, the scientist was pulling on the rope.
Oh, really?
We got him on stage, and he actually took part. And he is now completely converted. He went to the theatre, he knew about dance performances, but he didn't know what went into it.
Yeah.
And equally, you take the artist to the scientist lab and you spend time with them looking through the microscope.
Yeah.
That is done more frequently, but scientists more rarely leave their labs to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you have to use that parallel. I've been asked now to do it in another field, in the field of conflict. Between politicians and people.
Yeah.
So they said, because you can bring people together, bring that to us. So it can be applied,
Sure.
but there is a really important trick, and it's about being authentic, being genuine, and spending time with people. People need time, really.
You know that in France we are quite romantic. That's the legend.
Yeah.
So are these two people together now?
No.
No. Okay. Okay.
It's not a matchmaking process. I mean, it is a matchmaking process,
It could have been.
but not dating.
Okay.
That's it.
So they didn't do mitosis together and okay.
They're not going to have babies.
Une dernière question.
J'ai également une dernière question.
Alors vas-y, Danièle.
Oui, Jean-Louis, vous parliez de sensations et d'émotions de l'enfance. Est-ce que le digital peut réveiller toutes ces émotions ?
Alors en fait, le digital, ça n'est qu'un, on va dire, ça n'est qu'un média, ça n'est qu'un contact entre nous et l'environnement. Si on regarde même les choses avec un peu de recul, finalement, la réalité, notre cerveau l'aperçoit au travers d'un écran, enfin de l'écran des sens, etc. Donc le digital peut simuler un certain nombre de choses assez proches de la réalité, même si c'est et dans le digital, comme dans les préférences pour les produits, selon notre dynamique de personnalité, on va avoir des préférences. Il y a des gens qui vont aimer des systèmes un peu compliqués où on peut trouver tout ce qu'on veut. Il y a des gens qui vont aimer des choses très simples. Il y a des gens qui vont aimer des choses très travaillées sur le plan esthétique. Je dirais, malheureusement, la solution unique qui plaît à tout le monde est une illusion. Et je pense que en fait, les études qu'on a pu faire sur des marques qui réussissent, et on est en train d'en mener une sur le parfum actuellement, mettent en évidence que les marques qui réussissent, dans le luxe comme ailleurs, sont des marques qui ont pris un parti pris fort de se dire je fais une marque pour tel segment de gens, alors non pas sur des données socio-culturelles, mais sur des données de personnalité profonde, de dynamique, de motivation, et qui travaille à toutes les étapes finalement de la création de valeur, c'est-à-dire dans les designers, les créatifs, les parfumeurs en amont ont en tête une représentation de la dynamique comportementale finalement de la cible visée. Toute la chaîne, le marketing, la communication travaille finalement le développement produit, travaille pour finalement essayer de satisfaire des choses qui sont des besoins spontanés. Enfin, pourquoi dépenser des millions et des milliards d'euros pour créer des besoins chez les gens alors que finalement, nous avons des besoins et il suffit de se baisser pour les écouter et les ramasser. Enfin,
c'est une très bonne conclusion. Ça.
Très bonne conclusion.
Surtout pour les directeurs financiers.
On va, avant de vous lever et avant de vous souhaiter très bon appétit, on va laisser la parole à Marie-Pierre qui a un petit message.
Ouais. Juste un petit message, je vais passer une surprise de dernière minute. Et je voulais juste faire une petite remarque à Monsieur Prata. J'ai pas le sentiment, à travers l'exposé de Marina Wallace, qu'on se soit éloigné du centre du sujet. Ma perception à moi, qui complète les vôtres, c'est que le luxe aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment la connaissance et ce partage de connaissances. Et rien de mieux que le digital dans un monde éminemment vulgarisé, standardisé, rabattisé, dans le monde qui nous fait croire qu'on peut se transformer en une vedette en 2 jours. Rien de tel que le digital pour diffuser cette connaissance élitiste, cette connaissance sélective. Et je crois que cette force-là est exceptionnelle. Cette force est liée à l'émotion, cette force est liée au partage. Et comme le rappelait Marina, si on arrive à faire dialoguer 2 sciences aussi extraordinaires que l'art et la médecine, alors tout est possible. Et je pense que nous, marques engagées, qui avons l'ambition de créer de vrais beaux produits, qui répondent à une attente, et une attente d'un consommateur qui cherche un sens. Je n'ai pas fait de marketing comme chacun d'entre vous, je n'ai pas fait de digital, je n'ai pas fait tout ça. Moi, je viens d'un univers différent, mais ce que je sais faire, c'est observer et regarder les autres. Et ce que je constate, c'est qu'on est encore une fois tous drivés par nos émotions. Et si les marques se rappelaient, comme le disait Michel Gutten, que ce que l'on recherche avant tout avec un produit, c'est à ressentir du plaisir, à vivre une émotion positive. Ça rapporterait, encore une fois, comme le disait Michel, l'église au centre du village. Et ça me paraît essentiel. Donc, Marina Wallace est au cœur du débat, comme Christina Brandstorp. Je crois que tout est fondamental. Et si les créateurs d'aujourd'hui, si les marketeurs d'aujourd'hui se rappelaient cela, revenaient à l'essence même de la connaissance et s'imprégnaient de toutes ces connaissances, sans devenir des experts, je crois que franchement, le monde serait meilleur. Alors, compte tenu de ça, j'ai repris une remarque de Jacques Binger tout à l'heure qui disait que quand il assiste au défilé, il est très surpris de voir que personne ne regarde le défilé, mais chacun le filme à travers un petit écran. Alors moi, je crois que les écrans créent l'imaginaire et le féerique, Jean-Louis. Ça ne vulgarise pas l'approche du projet, mais c'est vrai que c'est assez surprenant de voir qu'on ne profite plus de l'instant présent. Et donc j'ai envie d'inviter sur scène Oli Niebella, que je ne connaissais pas il y a quelques instants, mais puisqu'elle est là, elle est arrivée avec Marina Wallace et Christina Brandstorp. Elle intervient auprès des sociétés sur le principe de pleine conscience, mindfulness. Et c'est vrai que ce que l'on oublie aussi, nous, marques, dirigeants de sociétés, marketeurs, responsables de projets, c'est de prendre conscience de l'instant présent. Quittez vos livres, quittons nos livres, quittons ce que nous avons appris et essayez simplement de ressentir et vivre ce que vous traversez, ce que l'on vous présente. Marina a présenté un très joli film. Je crois que certains ont décroché, mais si on s'était immergé dans ce qu'elle présentait, je crois que ça apporterait beaucoup de légèreté, de sublime à ce que nous faisons chaque jour. Alors, Oli, 2 minutes only, I know, because everyone is hungry today. So, can you explain what you do?
Très bien. Bon, je prends les 2 minutes. Je peux dire simplement spécialiste de l'instant, parce que c'est vrai, j'ai jamais pensé que je vais être sur scène avec vous. Je suis venue parce que Christina, c'est une amie. Aussi, je tiens bien cette idée de luxe et digital, parce que c'est quoi aujourd'hui le luxe, hein? Pour beaucoup que je rencontre dans les conférences et les formations que je fais, le luxe, c'est donner le temps à soi-même. Et c'est ça que je vais vous guider, de prendre une autre peut-être connexion. On est tellement habitués de se connecter au Wi-Fi, Facebook, Instagram, voilà, toutes les choses à l'extérieur, tous nos contacts. Mais probablement, la connexion la plus importante de votre vie, c'est avec vous-même. Comment est-ce qu'on fait ça? Est-ce qu'on prend du temps, un autre luxe, de simplement de se poser avec soi-même, avec aucun but, avec simplement dire je respire. Et c'est ça la pratique que je vais vous guider. Alors, je vous demande de poser vos téléphones. Peut-être changer votre manière que vous êtes assise. Moi aussi, je veux prendre une chaise. Et de poser les stylos. Peut-être mettre le dos un petit peu plus droit. Allez-y. En tous les cas, je vais vous demander aussi si vous êtes confortable de fermer les yeux, comme ça personne ne va le voir. Alors dans cette position maintenant, le cerveau, parce que la neuroscience est très très impliquée dans le travail que je fais, hein, le mindfulness, la pleine conscience. Le cerveau est en train de dire, mais qu'est-ce qui se passe? Première chose, c'est simplement de ressentir votre corps maintenant. Le contact, le toucher. Peut-être il y a des pensées qui passent. Peut-être le vent qui dit j'ai faim, j'ai soif. On va noter toutes ces choses par le contact, par le ressenti, l'émotion. Tout ce que nous avons entendu. Et on va essayer de pas couper avec toutes ces choses, mais simplement diriger notre attention vers notre respiration. Et essayer de se concentrer sur le prochain inspire, Puis le suivi, l'expire. Puis le deuxième, et continuez comme ça, de noter. En fait, je suis simplement en train de respirer. Je sens l'air qui passe peut-être dans mon nez. Je sens le mouvement, l'ouverture de mon abdomen. Peut-être y a une pensée. Tous ces allers-retours. De revenir toujours sur l'instant de je respire. Puis, avec la prochaine inspiration, peut-être essayer de prendre une respiration plus ample. Vraiment de remplissez bien les poumons, expirez. Longue expiration. Et en ouvrant vos yeux, notez simplement là, maintenant. Je vous souhaite un excellent déjeuner, excellente conférence. Merci pour ce petit moment comme ça. Merci.
Merci. Comme disait le philosophe Jean-Claude Van Damme, maintenant, vous êtes aware.
Merci, Oli. Je voulais juste vous dire merci de votre patience. Et si vous pouvez revenir cet après-midi, il y a une innovation à vous présenter. Et une célèbre make-up artiste de Hollywood que nous ne connaissions pas il y a quelques jours a accepté de venir la présenter. Donc je vous recommande de venir. Et il y a une keynote également sur la géographie du luxe aujourd'hui. Franchement, venez, il y a des ateliers très sympas. Et une dernière keynote animée par Jérôme Monange, qui sera très proche des experts du digital et du marketing qui sont là aujourd'hui, qui vous passionnera. Merci, à tout à l'heure. Alors on reprend 14h15. Merci Oli.
Merci Denis. Merci Marie-Pierre. Merci à vous.